Poker face is emotion regulation. It's not letting my own ego, emotions, and bias influence my decision.
That's Tiffany Michelle, World Series of Poker champion.
Bluffing is not about bravado, and it's not about deception. It's about reading people. It's about understanding your opponent, understanding the situation, and making a play because you have a sense that it's the right time to move.
I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. I sat down with Tiffany to discuss why emotional regulation is the highest leverage skill in the room, the role of luck versus skill when it comes to good and bad outcomes, and how to make better decisions with incomplete information.
We can't eliminate uncertainty. We can only learn to operate more confidently within it. And we can only learn to become better decision makers when there's so many variables that we do not have control of.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. Tiffany, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
For those listening to the podcast that may not be as familiar with you, what led you to poker?
What led me to poker? Grandpa Carl, my Korean War veteran, Grandpa Carl. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I was raised in a very conservative home. 2 boys, 2 girls. I was homeschooled my entire education. I got my GED at 16 and began college courses, not because I was a brainiac. I think people connect like, oh, she must be brilliant because she started going to college at 16. I just got to skip so much of the time we waste in school by being home educated. And so I was the youngest of 4. I was always out-muscled, always outsmarted. I was the runt of the family. And so I just kind of had to fight a little harder and try a little harder. I think that having to compete at such a young age against siblings who are older than me with a combination of genders, against my dad, against my mom, against so many different brains, allowed me from a very early age to feel comfortable in competitive situations against a range of opponents. And so my grandpa at some point decided to teach me to play Texas Hold'em poker, because nothing says wholesome childhood development like learning to bluff your way through high-stakes scenarios before you hit double digits. And I instantly loved the game. I loved the tangibility of poker. It wasn't just this conceptual idea. It was like every time you won or you did a profitable thing, you literally raked in, all of the chips. And there was something that I loved that connected like winning and making a good decision to here's the tangibility of the thing you win. And when you're 8 years old, if that's Skittles or chocolates or M&Ms, that's even more valuable to you, right, than any kind of currency. So he taught me how to play. I loved it. And I quickly realized that I was younger and I was a girl, but I could actually figure a way to beat other better or more qualified opponents in this game by using psychology, by using bold action, by using intuition. And I loved it. And there was definitely something being a female playing against my grandpa and my 2 brothers that the minute I beat a boy, the satisfaction that I felt, because men traditionally are very competitive. So seeing my brothers get so pissed off because I beat them, whereas you play games against girls and oftentimes it's like, good game, that was really well played. But the reaction I get from boys, or now today men, of like, I can't believe that happened, right? I love the feeling and the adrenaline rush of like, yeah, damn straight, like kicked your ass, right? So I really loved beating male opponents. And I sensed that there was something greater and more valuable or more powerful to being able to do that than when I competed against women. So Grandpa Carl taught me how to play. And then when I was about 19 years old, I started watching it a bunch on TV. And then I lived in Los Angeles, so everybody in Hollywood loved to play cards. Actors had the bankroll to actually be able to afford to play poker, even though I only played a $40 home game. But over the course of 2 years, I sat in this Hollywood home game for $40 and became a consistent winner and really got my trial by fire education with the practical application of playing the game.
I'm curious, what separates, just in your experience, like good from great players, right? Because when you're at the Series of Poker, I'm assuming everybody's a great player. I mean, maybe that's a false assumption, but just the fact that they're not amateur players at that point. So are there certain traits that you look at? Is it somebody that understands probabilities well? Is it somebody who manages emotion well? Like what separates good from great?
What separates good from great? Well, the World Series of Poker is a melting pot. So you think that the World Series of Poker is the penultimate, but actually the beautiful thing about the World Series of Poker is it is the largest, richest, most prestigious poker tournament, and anyone from anywhere with any experience can play. If you can afford the entry fee, which might be $1,000, and today they have high rollers that are $250,000 to enter, but the most popular one is $10,000 to enter. It's not all great players there. You know, you could walk in tomorrow, Michael, and be like, I've got $10,000. Let's give this a go. A $9 million first place. I'm a gambler. Like, let me $10K to win $9 million. Let's give that a shot. So it is a wide range of all different types of players. So it's not just the creme de la creme. But if you're asking, when I'm in situations where you are playing around, so those, a lot of times those 250Ks or 50K buy-ins, the high rollers, now you are getting some of the best players in the world. Yeah. What separates...
Oh, so there is a correlation there, the amount they're willing to invest with the level of
you're
skill.
Not going to see Daniel Negreanu and Phil Hellmuth, the best players in the world, playing a $500 poker tournament around the corner at their local casino. At some stage, your talent can be equal to the money you want to invest and the money you want to win from the game, right? So most likely there's lower stakes, there's mid stakes, and then there's high stakes. Although I will say that in the highest stakes poker, you're also going to find billionaires that can just afford it and want to sit there and play at the top level that maybe they are not as skilled as the best players in the world. I play kind of these middle stakes now. I don't choose to play very high stakes because I like to choose and select games where I feel like I have an edge. And obviously, the higher you go, not only is there larger risk with your bankroll, but you're now putting yourself against some of these high rollers. It's like the best players in the world. Why would I want to sit down and play with the best players in the world? I'd prefer to play with your mom, your child, somebody who does not have a lot of experience, right? That gives me an edge in the game. I think what separates amateur players from great players, one thing is, number one, the reps that the best players in the world have put in, right? You could come in and get lucky playing a poker game or playing against me, but can you repeat that result 100 times? Emotion regulation. We love to watch the game of poker because there's so much emotion. There's tilt, there's ego, there's rage, right? Like, how could you? There can be something, which I love about the game, really insulting about somebody making a play and you make a big fold with your pocket aces and I flip over 7 deuce, the worst hand of poker, and you're like, fuck you, right? I can't believe you did that to me. The way it wounds our ego, right, is a fun thing in the context of poker. So the best players in the world have learned to separate their emotions from the strategy. I like to say that if you can separate an emotional hit from your strategic next move, that is an edge in life that most people will never be able to have. So the emotion regulation of continuing to go back to the fact that this is a game of cards, this is a game of probabilities, emotion has no place here and will only distort and hurt my reads and my decision making. So I think emotion regulation, and then understanding that you would come in and sit down. I'd like to think about the amount of levels deep that we play poker and think about poker. If you started playing poker today, you would probably be thinking 2 levels deep. What is my hand and what's on the board? That's thinking 2 levels deep. I am thinking, what's my hand? What's on the board? What's your hand? What do you think I have? What's my stack size in relationship to yours? If you push all in, what am I prepared to do here? So I'm thinking so many levels deep more than you are. And what I notice with new players is they're thinking very surface. And as you develop strategy, you learn to go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole and understand all the different factors to include in your decision making.
So at what point, I guess just in your career, did you kind of go from playing poker and winning to then realizing I'm pretty good at this, right? When you're winning consistently, right? Because poker, unlike chess, is that there's the luck component, right? You could play a hand perfectly and still lose, but still made all the right decisions.
Right. Yeah, poker and chess are similar in that there's moves, there's counter moves, there's trying to get in the head of your opponent, right? But chess is a game of complete information. So you see all the pieces on the board. Poker, we are missing information, right? Because I can't see the two cards in your hand. I think the great thing about poker is that the ROI can usually tell you when you're ready to move up or how good you are at the game, right? And unfortunately, most people are lying to themselves. And they're like, I win poker all the time. And it's like, well, let's see your stats. Like the last 10 games you played with your buddy, you lost, but you had 2 big wins, and those big wins felt louder than your losses. So I think at some point over the course of 2 years, not only did I become a consistent winner and consistently profitable in the home game that I was playing, but I noticed how many other players, I just thought that's how it went, right? Like, oh, you play and you lose some, but you win more than you lose. I started noticing how many players at the table consistently were losing and consistently were not being honest about how much they were losing. And that mirror helped me realize, like, oh, I think I'm better than them. I think I'm making better decisions than they are. I think that the ROI that I'm making is telling me that there's something to this. So the more I played, the more I won. You know, you sit down and you play a tournament against 100 people and you make it to the final table and you do that 5 times over. Whereas you see someone else who's been playing for years, or like, I've never made a final table. And you're like, oh, I must be doing something different than you. So I think the results told me that I had a knack for the game. And then other players told me that. They would sit at the table with me, people I'd played with a long time, people I'd played with a short amount of time. They would say, like, oh, you're really good. I notice you do that thing. And so when other people that I respected started telling me that, it led me to believe, oh, I think there's something to this.
Is there, in that example you just mentioned, where someone's been playing for years, they've never made it to a final table, you've been playing for years, you have made it. What was different about your feedback loop? Like, why would you get better and somebody else could, like, theoretically play more games but not improve?
The thing that made me a winning poker player was not winning poker. It was asking sharper questions when I lost. So my ability to, in my discomfort when I had lost or I had done something wrong or I had an unlucky result, whatever my negative outcome was, instead of, which a lot of people do who play poker, I'm so unlucky. That's so unfair. The rabbit foot didn't work today. My sock was on the wrong, foot. And I laugh at these players that believe there's any kind of superstition involved in the game. You have complete control of the choices you make. You cannot control the cards, but you can control all the choices you make. And guess what? Even when you get the best cards and you have the best percentage to win, you have aces, you have a choice to fold aces. You could decide to go all in with those aces, or if you have 4 players who are all in around you and one of those people could eliminate you, and you are on the bubble of the World Series of Poker and you paid $10,000 to enter that tournament, and you know that you could get a payout of $21,000 if only 5 more players from the tournament are eliminated, you can fold aces if there's a 4-way all-in situation. In fact, there's some people, hardly ever, but like notoriously the very first hand of the $10,000 World Series of Poker main event, there are amazing stories of players who are like, the very first hand I got aces and I just open folded it. I was just like, nope, not messing with you today. Done, out. Like, I'm not being eliminated at the first hand at the World Series of Poker. So players that I think don't improve blame bad luck, and bad outcomes are not always the result of bad luck. They are often the result of bad decision making. So then you have to go inward, right? What was the flaw in my process? What did I fail to do here? What did I fail to analyze? And I think the players that never get better are not willing to look at every single thing they did wrong, or at least map out alternative scenarios to, I could have played it this way, I could have played it this way, I could have played it this way.
And you mentioned earlier, just unlike chess, with poker, you're making decisions based on incomplete information. You can't see somebody else's cards. Sometimes when they fold, you'll never know what hand they had. Do you have a framework of how you make decisions when the information is incomplete?
God, such a big question, Michael. There is a combination of things at the poker table, right? In life, we're all navigating uncertainty. There's a lot of variables that are ever changing in our personal lives and in our business. We can't eliminate uncertainty. We can only learn to operate more confidently within it, right? And we can only learn to become better decision makers when there's so many variables that we do not have control of. So at the poker table, I think it's a combination of, when I make a decision, what's automatic, what's analytical, and what's instinctual. What's automatic is pre-programmed. For me, it's like, I will always raise ace king, or I'm always going to raise aces pre-flop, right? That's automatic. That's something that I already know is like the go-to thing I'm going to do. What's analytical is processing the variables. What do I know about this player that I've played with for an hour? How deep are the stacks? What are the pieces of information that I know, the variables that could change the situation, could change the picture? And then what is instinctual? So even though on paper I know that I mathematically should always make this play, wait a second, Michael just called really fast and then like bomb shipped all in on the flop. And something's telling me this behavior is off from everything I've seen him do the last hour. There is something happening in this situation that feels different than the information that I know. And so I can combine those three things, what I automatically know to do or what is right to do on paper, what I'm processing analytically, and then what I am feeling instinctually, which is kind of just a way to say that I am, what information do and don't I have? What do I know about this player? And how might my ego, emotions, and my own bias be distorting this read? And so it's a combination of those things that then allow me to, with all these ever-changing variables, make a decision that I feel more confident on.
Is it ever more challenging? I'm just curious, like playing against a more novice player in the sense that they might behave irrationally. Like I know in the business world, it's a lot easier to deal with somebody who's a professional because they'll still act rationally. Like you'll know they'll evaluate upside and downside and risk, and they generally won't do irrational things versus somebody that does not play by that code may make the absolute wrong decision, and it's very difficult in a business context to navigate that. Do you ever experience that in poker?
1,000,000%. That's a great question. That's a great observation. I actually had somebody from one of your summits, an attorney, come up and say, I'd be really hard to play poker against because I'm a crazy player. I'm irrational. You wouldn't know what to do with me. And I was like, oh, honey, you are my favorite player to play against because I would prefer to play against a bad poker player the rest of my life than play against a talented poker player. But I know what you mean in that when somebody has strategy and logic and you know kind of where their brain is thinking, you can think on that same level. So it feels like we should be able to beat that mindset, that person. But over the course of time, even if a wild card comes in and they have irrational and crazy thinking, okay, sure, they could throw me off my game and I could be a little confused by what they're trying to do. But it always comes to what's the sample size? Like, let's look at outcomes. This crazy person could beat me in poker a couple hands, but give me 100 hands against them, and I'm probably going to beat them in 90 out of the 100 hands. So I have to lean into and trust the long-term results and how skill is going to outweigh somebody that's crazy and lucky. But if I'm a good enough decision maker, so you're talking about, wanting to argue or deal with people that have a similar thought process as you do because it makes it easier to get into their brain, I still believe we have the same ability to understand somebody that doesn't use that same logic. All that I have to do is sit with this new crazy player 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes to understand now what their patterns are. So those patterns may not be what I do, but I can sit there and say, oh, okay, that crazy thing he did with that directly ties to like the bet sizing that he uses. So understanding the player you're sitting across from is always going to come down to observation. And the thing that gives me the edge is I know how to get to that player's mind. I know how to observe what they're doing. And then I actually know how to diversify my game and my choices and my actions in a way that can actually beat that player.
That makes sense. Now, what about separating decision quality from outcome quality? Meaning that most people, I think, when they have a good outcome, they believe it's as a result of good decision making, and a bad outcome is bad decisions. But in reality, you can make good decisions that have bad outcomes, and you can make bad decisions that have good outcomes. How do you approach that, and how do you reconcile that in the sense that sometimes you could play a hand perfectly and still lose?
That's the real joy of playing the game of poker. There's no other game like poker in that you can have the best hand and lose, and you can have the worst hand and still win. I don't think there's any other arena in life where strength doesn't automatically equal success and weakness doesn't automatically equal failure.
But it's a parallel to life too. I mean, I think that's poker's closer to life than chess is, in the sense that you can make a lot of the right decisions and still have a bad outcome.
I think the important thing to do is, first of all, acknowledge what you just did. You just teed up your audience for like a game-changing insight. Just because something good happened doesn't mean your process leading up to that was a good process or a replicable process. And just because you did something good that turned out bad doesn't mean that your process leading up to that wasn't the right one. So I know Annie Duke talks about this a lot in Thinking in Bets, which I know is a book that you guys have tried to dive into to grasp some poker mindsets. And I think you have to reverse engineer. If every single time you have a good result, you just, quickly look and assess, all right, what things did I do here that got to that? Is that something that I could keep reproducing? Can I do that time and time again and expect to get that same result? And not necessarily throw out, oh, shoot, this bad thing happened. I didn't like where that ended up, or this investment went awry. I should never do that again. Well, if you sit there and realize, oh no, it seems like I got a little bit unlucky and it was the wrong day or this other factor influence. So I think it just comes down to going back to your process of, is this scalable? I think Annie says, if you build a strategy or a process on something that was luck-based, you're building something that can't scale. But when you understand that the actions and the choices that you made were actually controlled, then you can keep doing that again. But if they had to do with luck, you cannot repeat and recycle luck time and time again. So I think it's just simply an understanding and giving the appropriate credit to that was a result due to skilled decision-making, and that was a result due to something lucky or unlucky.
I'm curious, does having good judgment translate always into being good at poker? And does being good at poker translate into having good judgment in other areas of your life?
Broad good judgment? Yeah. I think that the game of poker allows me to sit down with a range of opponents. Every single time I sit down, the card game is always the same, but the variables are always changing. Every time I sit down, I am forced to sit there. What do I know about this player? Where is he from? Why is he dressed like that? How much do I think he's worth? What do I think his education is? Where's his accent from? What does that accent tell me about the area that he grew up in? I am constantly, and I can't shut this off, evaluating people or players. Any social situation that I walk into, I then take that mindset from the poker table into. Hear me out on this. I'm not walking around judging every single person, asking if what can they do for me. But in certain rooms, it's, do I need to connect with that person? Is that person a valuable contact for me? Does this person feel uncomfortable? Are they wasting my time? Does this person want something seedy from me? Is this someone I need to separate myself from? So it allows me to quickly assess people. And now I know who is valuable, who maybe I should stay away from. Maybe this has to do with romantic relationships, right? These senses and these observations that we make. And now when it comes to making a decision, I've learned to kind of, as I said, what information do I have? What information don't I have? What do I know about the players? And what am I feeling right now? And I can take that into any decision that I make in life. A lot of times, especially as a woman, although men can be equally as emotional, I find myself stuck or I don't have an answer. I'm feeling extremely emotional. And I just come back to this place now of like, okay, we're playing a hand of poker. What are these emotions? I'm angry. I'm pissed. It's unfair. All right, let's take those and let's put those over here. And now what is the information? You have to go to your uncle's house for Thanksgiving and you hate it there. And I can just filter out all of these pieces just to get down to, okay, and now what is the right move? What is the right play? What gets me to the result that I want? And then also going 5 steps further, okay, if I make that decision, what are the things that fall in line with that? And so I can just kind of imagine and see my future and be better prepared for what is coming with the decision that I make. That is something that pretty much everything in life and all of my friends tell me, like, you talk too much, you think too much, you're analyzing too much, shut it down, Tiffany, shut it down. You don't need this in every situation. But I do find that how I process at the poker table, I'm able to take into life. And maybe I can shut it off sometimes when I need to, but at least knowing I can always access that to get myself an answer or have a process that I can layer onto something that doesn't even apply to poker makes me feel a little more in control when I'm walking into any kind of situation.
Is that a skill like that can be honed, like that level of self-awareness? Like for somebody's listening to that, saying that, I wish I could do more of that. Like, is there something that they can do, that they can practice, that can help them improve?
That's a good question. I'm always self-analyzing myself, and what I realize often, I just assume like, maybe this is my ego. I just assume everyone operates like me, right? So then it's tricky for me to sit there and go, okay, wait, how did I get to this place? And how much of this is nature versus nurture? How much of this was already in me? And then how much of the game has like built these things? Yes, out there, you too can think like a poker player in order to make more optimal decisions or to feel more in control of your life. Here's my 3 maybe simple C's: clarity, competitive edge, and calibration. So if you focus on creating an environment of clarity when you have to make a decision, and like I said, for me, it's filtering out what's my emotion, what information do I know, what information do I have, and what do I know about this person? Let's just keep it that simple. That is the clarity that allows me to make decisions. also in that same situation, I'm often looking for what's my competitive edge. And competitive edge for me could be what sets me apart from these other people. What do I have to offer? So for me, in a lot of rooms I've walked into, it's because I'm a woman. And that's different than all the men that I'm surrounded by. A lot of the opportunities have come to me because I was a female in a male-dominated world, and that was marketable. But it doesn't have to do with gender. I've also brought a lot of authenticity to the things that I do in my life. I notice how fake people are and how many of us are trying and how many of us care so much about impressing. And the minute that we can bring more authenticity to what we're doing, we can absolve ourselves from performative pressure and from performative posturing. And it's a terrifying thing to do. But the times in life that I've had big leaps and big growth and big opportunities have simply just been from when I'm being the most authentic. One of the first times I was at the World Series of Poker asked to be on camera interviewing players. I'd never done this job before, but I like to play the game. So I just, as we're doing here, just started having conversation. Why'd you play that hand? Why'd you do it? Bro, that was crazy. Are you stupid? You went all in with that? I brought my authentic thoughts and self to the thing that I was doing. And all of the viewers that saw this were like, oh my God, she's so real. I want to hear more of that. So I didn't realize at the time that my authenticity was the thing that now people started to hire me for because I wasn't trying. And it was easy. The crazy thing is it's like this crazy hack. It's really easy to be your honest self when you decide that I don't care what other people are going to say and think about me. But the amount of people that are going to connect with you, and it's this cheat code because it's the easiest thing to do. And I don't have all these voices in my head saying you should and you shouldn't and this. It's like, oh no, I just show up and say the thing that I'm thinking and do the thing. So
it's almost like people overweight the value or the downside of being authentic. So when they consider the upside, they say, yo, this could create a new opportunity for me. I could take advantage of this. I could elevate my career. But then they say, but the downside, if I'm authentic and what will people think? Yeah. I think they perhaps overweight that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like my competitive edge was being a female, being authentic, showing up on time, caring about the work that I do. There's a lot of things, but what's your competitive edge? And then calibration. We are constantly, in every single situation, going to have to stop, step back, and calibrate. So what did I like about what occurred there? What can I replicate? What do I feel uncomfortable with? What did I get wrong in that situation? How do I need to adjust for that in the future? Throughout your life, there's going to be the person that got you here will not be the person that takes you further. The skills that got you here will not be the skills that take you to the next level. You're going to constantly have to evolve and calibrate. So create clarity for yourself, find your competitive edge, and then constantly be calibrating. And I think that maybe to answer your question, that's just the tiny little formula that I think if you can start to focus on that. But the biggie, the big is in every single situation, how are ego, emotion, and irrational thinking influencing my decision? Is this decision reactive or strategic? If you stopped and asked yourself that question, every single time you had a big moment or a problem to solve, or you were up against a wall, I believe you will not only find clarity in that moment, but if you keep doing that, I think you're going to expand your advantage and expand your edge because now you are just so much more aware of like, you are in control. You have the answers. If you hate this shit, come in here and you can do some work. And I promise you that you are going to find new channels and new pathways and new roads when you understand and can control this better and you understand this better.
Yeah. Now, what about like on the converse of that? When you're in a high stakes situation and you are stressed out, overwhelmed, sleep deprived, and you've made a lot of decisions already up to that point, how do you, under pressure, ensure that you're making the right decision? Because all of that is thrown out of whack in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in these crazy moments. You know, I told the story at the World Series of Poker after a $10,000 buy-in. We've been playing for 7 days. This was the largest tournament, the biggest field, the longest 12 to 14-hour days of poker I had ever played. I went from my $40 game to playing maybe $200 tournaments. Now here I am in a $10,000 entry tournament, $9 million for first place. It's the last day of the tournament. 27 players are left from a field of 7,000. My boyfriend literally the day before broke up with me. My parents walk into the stadium. They've never approved of me playing the game before. The headlines are going crazy, saying a lot of shit. And I'm under a microscope as a woman who could break records in this male-dominated field. I'm being offered these endorsement deals, and I literally sit down with 27 players left in the World Series of Poker main event and have to play the best game of poker I've ever played in my life for $9 million. In this moment, I think I did two things life does not wait for perfect timing. A lot of times when we have the biggest opportunity in front of us or we're being asked to perform at the highest level, chaos is erupting behind the scenes. And it was as simple as I kept bringing myself back to a state where I could think clearly. So when I was able to place this is all noise, and this is going to seem really simple, but I just want to challenge your listeners to try this the next time they feel in the thick of it. All of these things that I'm feeling, all right, let me just take these emotions and try to put these on pause. Let me take all the noise and try to put these on pause and come back to a place of clarity. And I think your listeners are going to say, but how do I create clarity, Tiffany? By these little movements of, and for me, it's a visualization of, let me take these emotions and pause those there, and let me take the noise and pause those there. And now what do I have here? And what am I looking at? And what is the information I have? It can literally be that simple as like a visualization. And then anchoring to, all of these things make us feel out of control, right? We are navigating uncertainty. We're out of control. It's overwhelming. It's eating us up. So for me, it's, I am actually in control. What can I control? I can control the next move I make. I can look at the cards, I can look at the problem, I can look at the hand and decide. I decide I want to fold. I decide I want to ask for advice. I decide, right? So I have felt in more control by realizing I can choose my next move. Can't choose all of that stuff, can't control all of that stuff, but I can choose my next move, and what next move do I want to choose? And when I can really condense it down to being really, really, really simple, that has helped me in high pressure moments feel in more control. And hopefully you have a support system, even if you just have one person that you can soundboard off of, that always just helps me have another voice in my head. If you can ask, I mean, in this situation, I could not phone a friend at the World Series of Poker nearing the final table, but in other situations in life, we can call on support. So I anchor to what I can control when I feel the most out of control. And that literally might just mean I can decide what I want to eat for dinner. I can decide to open that door and step outside and take a breath, right? Break it down to just the next hand, just the next step.
What about the decision fatigue? I know a lot of time, I'm sure a lot of people listening, they'll think, oh, sometimes I have to make so many decisions, I'm exhausted. But I love your take on this in the sense that perhaps not every decision is weighted equally.
Yeah. I like to say there's thinking 2 levels deep and there's thinking 20 levels deep. And you'll get an edge in the competition when you're thinking about more things and you're processing more variables than like your opponent or the person across from you is. But then the opposite side of that is, but it's too much. Make the voices stop. I'm so exhausted. I don't know what to watch on Netflix. There's too many options. So I think the decision fatigue doesn't come from thinking too much. It comes from believing that every decision deserves the same kind of thought. So it's not about thinking less. It's about thinking differently. And for me, the discipline is what's automatic, what's instinctual, and what's analytical. And so I don't need to bring all of the pieces of information to every single decision that I make. I can understand that some things are automatic. I can just trust the thing that I've always done in that situation. And then there's some situations in which I need to step back and go, okay, let me process the variables here. Let me process the analytics here. Let me think about all the different variables. At the poker table, I mentioned this earlier, it could be, what do I know about this player? How many chips do they have? Those can be the variables I think about. And then there's instinct. And here's an unpopular opinion about instinct. People ask me all the time about trusting your gut. How much of poker is trusting your gut? How much is like reading people? Unpopular opinion, I don't trust my gut. I don't trust my instincts always. Your gut is only as good as the data that you feed it. So I don't start with my gut and with my instincts. I start with the information I have in front of me. What do I know about this person? What information do I have to make this business decision? And then as a tiebreaker, okay, what is my gut? What does my instinct say here? Because the problem with our gut instinct is that unless you've ever sat down and taken a measurement, accurately measured how often your gut instinct is right or wrong, you actually don't know how sharp it is and how in tune it is. And unfortunately, we like to remember all the times, I knew that was right, my read said that was right, and we forget all the times it wasn't. So we don't actually have an accurate picture as to how much we can trust this. But the beautiful thing is we can layer that in or bring it in through a back door after we have all the information. So I try to feed my gut data in that situation. If my read and if the information that I have doesn't allow me to make, or I still feel unsure about the decision I have to make, then I might lean on, all right, what's my gut telling me to do here? But I just want to challenge people. And I know this is so unpopular because everyone's like, just trust it. Just trust it. Okay, that's cool. Try for a month just noticing I have this instinct that mom's going to call me tomorrow. I have this instinct that the Dodgers are going to win, whatever it is. Literally try to track how many times you say, I have this feeling that, and track every single time and then track what the result was. And you'll actually have a really interesting study on if these instincts were right or wrong.
So it's funny you mentioned this because I did this study years ago in the early days of the business. Every time we would interview somebody, I would rely on gut instinct on whether they would be a right fit for the organization or not, and whether we would hire them. So I had a lot of data. And when we look back over the data, it was like 3 or 4 years of data of me making gut-based decisions. We learned that I was right 50% of the time and I was wrong the other 50% of the time. It was completely unreliable as an indicator of whether you should hire somebody or not. And I wonder if some of that also stems from our beliefs, right? In terms of why we think what we think. And a lot of it's basically abstract, meaning that it's not something we've ever experienced firsthand, but it's something that we've either read or seen or consumed or for whatever reason that are our beliefs actually our beliefs. And where does bias creep in? I'm just curious from your experience.
Well, I kind of think what you're saying is this idea of instinct is magic. And instinct is actually compressed experience. Instinct is actually memory. So when we understand that these things that we're feeling are speaking to or coming from something we've experienced before, it's not some heaven sent. And I think that's why we so want to believe in these gut instincts and these gut choices, right? Is because we want to believe like there's this magical thing outside of us that we can lean on, right? Which absolves us from having to do a lot of the harder brain work. But when you understand that what is speaking to you is experience and memory, well, those, as you just said, those memories and experiences can be biased, right? So you have to sort through that. I think all I can offer to this question is if we're at least willing to start at we are biased people and we have formed our decisions and our feelings from everything that we have personally experienced, if we're willing to start there and acknowledge that, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of immovable people won't even start there. If you at least start there and then open yourself up to who are some people you respect? Who are some people you want to be like? Look at, and maybe these are people actually in your life. Hopefully they're people in your life. If you can connect to those people and ask some of the questions or issues that you have, how do you deal with this? How do you overcome this? How do you not let bias? I think a lot of the ways that I have learned is by leaning on other people that are doing the thing that I am doing better. And so I guess I would challenge these people to, number one, realize we are all biased. And in any situation, we can ask, is my bias, is my pre-existing belief, is my stereotyping, which I face all the time at the poker table, I would notice that male opponents would sit down. They would either avoid me, target me, or just flirt with me. In a game that the whole point is to make money, take your opponent's chips and make money and be the last one standing. So instead of coming to the table with a strategy to accomplish getting more chips, they sat down across from me and they're like, okay, they either targeted me because it's a woman, she's probably weak, I can probably bully her. Or they would avoid me, oh shit, it's a woman, I don't play with women a lot of times, what's she doing? I feel uncomfortable, I want to stay away from that. Or just throw the game out the door altogether and like, hey, baby, you want to go on a date later, which is also not accomplishing our goal of getting all the chips and winning. So a lot of times my male opponents would sit down with these stereotypes and bias. So I guess what I can speak to this bias conversation is that stereotype and bias and that action profitable for you? Is that helpful for you? Is it helping you accomplish the goal you're trying to accomplish? If it's not, let's strip away what I think and feel about this person. And I can, at the poker table, I'm across the table from 8 opponents a million times over. So I have learned to let me strip away everything I think and feel about this being in front of me. What am I trying to accomplish right here? And maybe the answer, let's use that scenario of men who avoided me because I was such a foreign object at the table, they didn't know how to play me. That is a decision. That is a choice. Okay, so I have this foreign object here. I feel uncomfortable. I can acknowledge that I feel uncomfortable. So the next decision I make needs to not take into consideration that I feel uncomfortable. Let's move that emotion from the picture and now say, okay, so what is the next step or the next play that will get me what I want to get? And maybe the next step and play in this immediate moment is I feel uncomfortable, so I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to sit here and start to feel more uncomfortable. And then after that 15 minutes, I'll devise my next game plan. So I think it's just about creating mini strategies and stripping away the things that we're seeing or feeling or looking at. And I just come back to, what do I need to get out of this thing? What accomplishes my goals? And can I peel away these layers that I believe are influencing and creating noise that won't help me devising the next strategy to accomplish what I want?
And for someone who doesn't think this way, I once heard that like a way to explain karma or define karma is like repeated actions and beliefs until you get what you deserve, right? So if it's a series of decisions that ultimately yield either a good outcome or a bad outcome, where somebody, they don't change until they feel the pain of their decisions, right? Or is this some sort of like negative reinforcement? But then there's the people that just essentially find ways to tell stories about their bad luck or their bad decisions, and they just kind of ascribe it to bad luck, perhaps. Perhaps it starts with an intent of actually growing and improving. Maybe that's where it all begins, of saying like, how do I just get better? And being better means being honest and actually reflecting on my past experiences or my past outcomes and saying, well, what role did I play in this? And perhaps that's the piece that I think no one wants it to be them. I think that's the that's the part. They want it to be something else or something outside of their control, but it's really hard to look in the mirror and say, no, it is me, and it is my identity that I have to give up to change. That's my theory on it.
Ah, preach. Going to the church of Michael. I love what you're saying. And it's like we're sitting here trying to crack or trying to help other people better understand. And it's like when we have these veils and these bias and all of these years, right? It's like, how do you even awake the desire to, right? You can't just, you have to have the desire to change. How do I get the desire to change? And it was interesting. What you just said made me instantly feel a little defensive of like, no, it's not me. No, I don't like that. No, that makes me feel uncomfortable. No, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to have to do the work, right? It would be so much easier if we just knew like, here's the magic pill and trust your instinct all the time, right? I see this all the time when I'm looking at like videos or insights or speakers. It's like all the video titles are like, the easier way to do the thing. Here's how to get the thing quicker. Life is hard. Decisions are hard. Success takes sacrifice. So like, let's strip away thinking there is some magic path. And when you're talking about you have to have this intent or desire to do this thing, maybe for the people that don't know how to change or are, and they probably don't even realize like they're blaming bad luck for things. But let's just say we're starting from a place of like, everyone listening is the same. If you want to improve in life and if you want to get better, number one, you can. You can make one choice, 5 choices, 10 choices. A lot of you can string together a lot of little choices and a lot of little decisions that move you further and get you ahead. So the beautiful thing here is you have all of the agency and you have all of the control. Life is going to feel very out of control, but you have all of the control. And I actually believe, and what I know from sitting at the poker table is you also have all of the fucking answers. You are just going to have to, one hand at a time, make a lot of little decisions and understand that the biggest decisions that you will make are going to be about yourself, and the hardest things you're going to have to process are going to be about yourself. If you don't like something that has happened to you or a result that you had, or you feel like life is unfair, the first place that you can start is there any flaw in my thinking? Is there anything I can change in my thinking? If I tried to do this again, I hate it, I got so unlucky. Okay, if you tried to do that exact thing again, what would you change? So now we're not telling people, here's a magic answer, here's how you do this thing, here's how you stop being an asshole. We're telling them, all right, take that thing that you didn't like and run some sims. If you had to do this 2 different ways, what choices would you make different? Just starting there, if every single time we assess, what could I have done differently here and gotten a different outcome? If we lived life in those little increments and just playing that one hand a different way, I think that can be a game changer.
If I may ask, if you go back to, I think, 2008 World Series of Poker tournament.
Oh God, I know what you're going to ask.
You know exactly what I'm going to ask.
Oh, I wish I could
right?
do this.
Basically, knowing then what you know today, would you do anything different?
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, I try not to obsess on this because I finished 17th out of 6,844 players for a payday of $334,000. Hallelujah. Beautiful, wonderful. I was, 8 people away from making the final table, which no woman had ever done with fields this size. That would have been a guaranteed $1 million payday. First place was $9 million. I came in the final day, 3rd in chips. So I was set up to get there and do well. And then once you make that final table and you have that million locked up, who knows what can happen. So trust me, Michael, I think about if I could go back in time and do things differently. What I did not understand at this stage of my game, and this was I was 24 years old. I'd been playing very casually about 4 years and maybe only 2 years in an elimination style tournament format of poker. I had good reads on people. I understood the strength of hands. I had some basic strategy. I had a lot of practical application, but I did not have experience in high stakes, deep tournament structure strategy. I did not understand that as the tournament goes by, you are going to have to shift and change your strategy along the way. And as you get towards the top and top and top, and there becomes more pressure and there becomes more money and all the players get better right up here at the top, I'm going to have to adjust for that. I kept playing the game. And I think part of the reason, I can't hate this, part of the reason I got to that point was because every single day, as a way to relieve the pressure, I told myself, just play like you're playing your $40 home game. Just come in and play that game that you know you were a consistent winner that you feel comfortable with. Play like you did there. And that helped me feel comfortable when I'm playing on ESPN in front of TV cameras for millions of dollars. So that mindset allowed me to get to the end. But it did not allow me to close out the tournament because I needed to, at that stage, adjust and go into a different gear that I did not have at that stage in life. All of my friends around me who are better poker players, I wish they would have spoken up in this moment. And so many of them said, you know what? We just wanted you. We don't want to put the pressure on. We just wanted you to keep doing what you were doing. And I wish somebody would have stepped in and said, Tiffany, you're third in chips. You can literally fold every single hand except for these two for the next 7 hours and you will make the final table. That is the reality of where I was at. I did not have the strategy at that stage of my game. It's like I can't even go back to change something because in that 24-year-old brain, I did not have the experience and the knowledge that I have now to change it. And it's not like my friend said, you should be doing this. Here's how to change your strategy. And I didn't listen to them. So if I could go back in time, it's like I would tell myself, you're third in chips. You can play really, really, really conservative. You don't need to acquire any more chips. You just need to coast. You just need to maintain. Don't take any big spots. Don't take any, big risks at this point. I was actually in a really comfortable situation where I didn't have to take any big risks in order to coast into the final table. That's what I would have told myself. But you and I were talking about this earlier. We can't go back in time. I don't believe that regret serves me today, but looking back and saying, what could I have done differently? We just said this, right? What could I have done differently? What other outcomes? I guess one thing I could have done differently was I should have asked the 3 most talented players I knew in that moment, what's your advice for me today? What strategy? 3 people who have been there before. What do you think that I should do? That's the easiest thing that we can do is ask for help. And so that's one thing that I could have done differently at that point. But I can't hate it that every decision that I made got me to where I got. As you and I were talking before the podcast, any decision I make differently leading up to that moment, maybe I don't get to that moment. So we have to find peace in the decisions that we made and then look back and say, okay, if I did that again, if I'm ever in that situation again, here's how it could go differently.
Yeah. No, it's amazing that just hearing your answer for this, because what I think a lot of people listening probably don't know, and that you didn't mention at any point, was the hand that took you out, which was an extremely unlucky hand, which was like a 2% probability? Because you could have just said, you know what, I just got unlucky.
Oh, right? Interesting.
And in no part of your answer did you blame luck for any of it.
Interesting.
How has the game of poker evolved? And how do you see it evolving? Because I think it's a really good example of how judgment evolves and people obviously improve, or are the players today better than the players 10, 20 years ago? Like, how do you see the game changing?
Yeah. Chris Moneymaker back in 2001, 2002, everyday average Joe accountant threw a $70, $80 satellite, meaning he played a cheaper tournament to win the seat into the more expensive tournament, changed the landscape of poker. So 70, 80 bucks, 30-something accountant wins his $10,000 main event seat. And then out of, 200 players that year, I don't think it was 300, goes on to win the World Series of Poker main event, which at the time was kind of like old boys club, all like seasoned players who were playing all the time. Goes in, wins it for $3 million. It was one of the early years it was televised on ESPN, so it opened up poker to the world and to poker players and some gamblers, and there's a difference between the two, to realize, oh my gosh, I can go on some big stage, enter this tournament, and win millions of dollars. And so that really changed and opened the floodgates for the average player to now come in and realize there's a lot of money to be made at this game. But then we've seen a few other iterations. Once people started playing more online poker, so when I play poker live, I'm getting about 30 hands per hour. When I play online, I'm seeing maybe 100 to 200 hands per hour because I'm playing at the speed of mouse clicks. And so I think online poker, the boom of online poker, which was probably 2006-ish, 2005-ish, it became a billion-dollar industry. Now players from their own homes are getting a lot of experience playing. So we've gone in a few different phases, but we're definitely at a point. And then after that phase, it's a lot of players. But then it's players realizing, okay, it's a lot of players. How do I get better at the game? So now it's like we have resources and solvers and game theory optimal teachers and coaches. So that players today are more talented and more educated and more strategic than they have ever been in the history of poker. But I think at any stage, you have the amount of players that realize this is a skill game and I can get better and I can study and I can do work and can become a little mathematical computer brain machine and apply that to the game. But you're always going to have the people that don't want to do the work, that are just the Chris Moneymaker types, the average Joe that's just like, yeah, I know how to play the cards. I know how that game goes. I have some good reads on some people. I'm just going to casually come in and play. I think there's always going to be this balance of the cream of the crop. But because there's a luck element, there's always going to be a giant portion, probably 50% of the field, that plays the game and wants to play the game and likes to play the game and relies on situations in which they get lucky to make profit. So we're definitely at this stage where people are almost exhausted at how solvable the game is now. And a lot of people were at this stage because there's so many resources and there's so many ways to get better. Now we're thinking like computers. And a lot of people are complaining that we're taking the human aspect away from the game, which initially was, I think you're bluffing. I see that twitch in your eye. I think you're full of shit. I call you. So we've taken so much of the emotion out of the game. And I speak a lot to poker face is emotion regulation. It's not letting my own ego, emotions, and bias influence my decision. Within that conversation, though, it's interesting. The more poker face we become, the more we lose a lot of those emotions. Going back to my childhood, I loved beating my brothers because they got pissed off. I love that tangible sense of winning. So it's hard because we're stripping some of the emotion out of the game that makes it so fun to watch. But we're at the stage, poker's huge, poker's booming. I want to say last year, the World Series of Poker had 10,000 people, I want to say, entered. It was the largest that had ever entered. I don't think poker is going anywhere. I don't think it's ever going anywhere. I think we'll continue to see shifts of the strategy and how GTO you can get with the game. But it's a beautiful melting pot because there's always going to be players that if you want to come in and play for the first time, you don't have to function that level to play, to have a fun time, and to potentially win. You're just going to have to keep improving your game if you want to become a winner consistently in the long run.
And something I picked up on, you said there's a difference between poker players and gamblers. How do you know which one you're up against?
Yeah, the difference is a gambler is playing a game, I think, to make money. And I think poker purists who love to play the game enjoy the strategy, the psychology, the mathematics, and they are playing a card game that adds some profit to when they make good decisions. But they are not there just to profit. There's a lot of bankroll management involved in being a responsible poker player. So the difference between a gambler and a professional poker player is the skill level, the amount of work that the professional player has done. A lot of the celebrity players that I honed my skills playing against, I noticed loved bluffing. They thought poker was all about bluffing. They loved that adrenaline rush of tricking an opponent, getting one over on them. The adrenaline rush and the ego boost of bluffing. They made flashy plays with no strategy, no end game, and no surprise they weren't consistent winners. And I sat back and I observed that bluffing is not about bravado and it's not about deception. It's about reading people. It's about understanding your opponent, understanding the situation, and making a play because you have a sense that it's the right time to move and because you have a read on your opponent. It may not even have to do with the strength or weakness of your hand, but it's something telling you that the information and the reads that you're getting, that I sense weakness in the opponent. So no matter what the strength of my hand is, if I sense weakness there, I can make a big play and put pressure on you. And it doesn't have to do with ego or with adrenaline. It's sensing that there is the right time to make a specific move. And so gamblers love the high, the deception, the ego boost, the adrenaline rush. A professional poker player's stripping away a lot of those emotions, and they're trying to just look at what is the most strategic way that I can get to profit in this situation.
Yeah. And as we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
What if being a game changer is doing something in your life or at the table that challenges other people to sit up and take notice and say, what is that? Why did they do that? That was interesting. That was different. I think that as we're talking about mindset and the control that we have, if we pay attention, there are people all around us that are doing things that we can glean from, that we can pick up from. And I think a lot of it, being a game changer at some point, is going to be doing something differently. It's going to be doing something bold. The biggest wins that I have seen at the poker table in my life don't come from waiting until you're certain. They come from boldly stepping into uncertainty and betting on your ability to analyze, adapt, and act. And maybe those three words are something that you're not there yet. You're like, but how do I analyze, adapt, and act? Take those words, Start thinking in your life how that can apply. Start thinking about how can I become better at analyzing my situation, analyzing myself, analyzing the information. How can I become better at, in any situation, adapting, adjusting? I normally do it this way, but maybe I should try it this way. And then how can I become better at taking action when, even if I don't feel the most comfortable, or choosing a course of action that is different or that is bold or that was advised to me? Everything that we do in life is going to require us, if we want to be a game changer, if we want to change the game, if we want to change our lives, we are going to have to be comfortable in situations that we are not comfortable, stepping into that uncertainty. And hopefully you will take the time to build those skills that once you find yourself in that situation, you will feel comfortable navigating that uncertainty.
I want to give a huge thank you to Tiffany for taking the time to join us on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at gamechangingattorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691 and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Tiffany Michelle, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.